We're all salespeople. Even if you're giving your product away for free, you still need users, you need buyers. And so today on episode number 125 of CXOTalk, I am thrilled to be joined by Tiffani Bova, who is a distinguished analyst at Gartner. And she is an expert in enterprise selling. And she is going to teach us how to sell more. And we're doing a lightning edition today, which means that I'm going to ask Tiffani a series of rapid fire questions, and she's going to give us the answers. Hey, Tiffani, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me back again on 125. I feel honored.
Well, I am honored that you're here, and this is exciting. So just to begin, give us a little bit of background on you, and you work for Gartner, so give us some background about Gartner as well.
Well, thank you. I spend 100% of my time looking at how technology providers bring their products to market, how they sell them, how they position them, and how they leverage third parties and resellers to really grow and scale their business around the world. It's an exciting space to be in. There's so much disruption in the technology space today. So I'm excited to spend some time talking about what I'm passionate about, which is sales.
Fantastic. So your focus is helping technology vendors sell more.
Absolutely. I mean, the net brass tacks of it is us salespeople. I like to call myself a recovering seller, as many people have heard me say before. I think that everything is interesting, but if you can't sell it, it doesn't matter. So it's the easiest way for me to describe where I spend my time. It's really on helping companies improve the effectiveness and efficiencies of their sales models and their sales motions.
Okay, so then let's begin with the question. So question number one,
Sure.
How can technology companies drive sales?
I would say that where they have lost their way a little bit is forgetting who the customer is. We first need to start with driving more sales means I need to understand who the buyer is, what their pain points are, and what are the things that will resonate with them from a value proposition perspective as well as a product perspective. And so I think that if we get back to remembering who the customers are and then re-segmenting the marketplace more intelligently around the new buyer personas and sort of their new expectations, I think it would go a long way to at least improve some of the performance declines they've had of late.
You mentioned buyer personas. What are buyer personas?
There's 100 different definitions of what they are but once again, speaking from a salesperson, I just want to know who is my target customer. What are they looking for? And is it a vertical and industry kind of persona? Is it a region and segment kind of persona? Is it a where are they in their buyer journey kind of persona? There's lots of ways to cut that. It could be on how likely they are to be an aggressive buyer of technology, or they're more of a mainstream buyer or a laggard buyer. There's so many ways to build out personas, but I think the first step is determining, as any organization, what does your customer look like? Who is it that you're targeting? And if you answer anybody, everyone, we know that starts to lose its effectiveness in the field, especially at what I like to call the moment of truth, which is the sales rep in front of a customer. If it's just too general, the customer is way out of line with what it is you're trying to say, because they don't believe you understand their business. So I would say at a minimum, regardless of how you define persona, let's make sure that you have 2, 3, 4, 5 targets of kinds of customers you're going to go after. As you get bigger, that list may get longer. But if you're smaller, have one. Is it a IT buyer? Is it someone who manages servers and storage? Is it the networking manager? Is it sourcing and procurement? Is it outside IT? Is it marketers or HR or CFOs? You just have to understand who you're targeting before you could ever imagine selling them something.
You mentioned salespeople. What
Yes.
do salespeople need to be effective?
The $1 million question. It's probably one of the top questions I get. As the technology changes, number one, and number two, as the buyers change, as we just talked about on the segmentation, The third thing I'd say is sales has to change. And this isn't just about processes and systems and compensation plans and how you organize the sales force. It has a lot to do with the actual human element, the people that you're putting in front of customers. And if you make decisions to become more verticalized or industry, or you're going to sell globally, then you want to make sure you're putting salespeople in front of those target buyers that actually have an understanding of that particular market. So having generalist salespeople who have been very successful over decades selling all kinds of technology, I'm sure, doesn't mean that it will resonate with this new customer that's far more informed and looking for and interested in things that resonate with them. So I'd say having industry expertise, having the right skill set, and then making sure that you give the sellers the right tools to be successful, because I think there's an overwhelming flood of tools being put in the hands of salespeople, and it's starting to confuse them on what's the best way to approach an account.
Now, what challenges do enterprise vendors face when they're trying to increase sales?
Well, in the tech space, I think the biggest issue for tech vendors today is many of them are in their own transition. Some of them are going from being strictly an on-premise kind of technology company to now embracing cloud more and more, which means they're moving towards becoming hybrid. And with that comes all kinds of challenges from a product and R&D, an organization, a cost of goods sold, SG&A, all those things are impacted. And the last mile, I like to say, is the sales rep. And some have even said the first mile because it's in the first conversation with a customer. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have the individual sales rep has been privy to all the things that are happening above them. So I'd say that the biggest challenge is as organizations are transitioning themselves, don't forget about your sales force. Don't forget about the people that are in the front line, in front of your customers, and make sure they are empowered and enabled to be successful with the new kinds of products and services you're bringing to market.
How can vendors overcome these challenges?
Well, here's what I'd say. I'd say the gap between strategy and execution is getting bigger. When you think about all the changes that are happening on the enterprise selling stage, especially for tech providers, ultimately it is just moving at a rapid pace. I'd argue that this is probably the most disruptive time we've seen in technology in many decades. With that then comes the complexity of making sure the entire organization is well aware of what it is that the company is trying to accomplish. And once again, at that moment of truth where the sales rep is in front of the customer, if the sales rep can't articulate all of the things that the company is trying to accomplish succinctly, then they look like they're not in aligned with not only where they work, but the customer themselves. So I think as executives that run sales organizations, you always have to pay attention that just because the strategy of the company makes sense to you, 4 levels down or 3 levels down or 2 levels down doesn't mean that sales rep understands. So really tying the strategy to execution becomes even more important.
Now, you spend a lot of time with channel partners. And so what are the challenges that face channel partners and resellers?
Yeah, and so I'd have to say that while I am a recovering seller at my core, my heart really lies with the indirect channel. I think that they are the unsung heroes of many of the fantastic growth strategies or growth experiences that many tech companies have had. And in some organizations, you could look at the Microsofts and Ciscos of the world where they have an overwhelmingly percentage of their revenues generated by third parties. And I think that people don't really realize all the things those partners do, from driving demand to selling to supporting to implementing and providing ongoing touch throughout the lifespan of that particular technology deployment happens in the hands of these third parties, whether it's systems integrators, the very large of the large, it can be very local value-added resellers. But either way, I think that when you look back at what enterprise technology companies are trying to accomplish, and even very small guys, when they look to scale and they're looking to enter new markets, they want to leverage people who have customer relationships already established, they have industry and vertical and geography expertise. And really the fastest way to find that is in partners who already entail those kinds of capabilities already versus trying to skill it up on your own. So I really believe they're the unsung heroes of the technology industry in enabling many, many providers to have successful growth.
So for these resellers, these channel partners, what do you recommend how they can become more effective sellers?
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge for the small resellers today is that the majority of them are smaller than 25 million, regardless of where you go in the world. If you're in North America or in Europe, the Middle East, even Africa, into APAC or Latin America, they tend to be smaller than 25 million, which means that they don't have a whole lot of available assets and cash to invest in transforming their business. Second, they already have very small teams, limited number of both salespeople and engineer and technical talent, and supporting resources. So what ends up happening is, even though they have absolutely the desire to make a transformation and follow the journey that many tech companies are on, as well as the journey that their customers are on, they find it really difficult to make those investments in their own business while they simultaneously have to keep paying the bills. So making a transformation while at the same time hitting revenue numbers and keeping the lights on is difficult for the largest of organizations. Even our biggest tech companies in the world struggle with that dilemma. And so when you look at someone who's smaller than 25 million, could be 3, 4, 5 million turnover, it gets more difficult for them to make those transitions. So I think finding ways to help those guys make investments in continuing to develop their business and helping them with finance and funding, whether you're a bank or a provider or a distributor, how can you help these guys continue to be successful, I think is key.
Okay, continuing with our lightning round, let's talk about relationships. What can technology vendors do to create better relationships with their customers?
Here's what I'd say. We started talking here at Gartner a few months ago, actually, and it started probably a few years ago as well, but it's gotten much more active of late, is that we believe that customer experience is going to be the new battleground. We really feel like that experience at the time that the customer engages with your brand, experiences your product or service, what they think of that engagement has long-term implications to you as a company itself. We know that buyers are now reaching out to their trusted network before they ever end up coming to a provider or to a brand. And so within that trusted network, you want a whole lot of really great advocates about your brand. And the way that happens is when those customers actually have fantastic experience with your company. And they become your brand advocates out in the marketplace, unbeknownst to you, not something you plan or schedule. It just happens organically. And so I think that when you look at customer experience as a way that you can absolutely compete, you've got some companies that actually compete on the fact that their service is better, or they have fanatical support, or that they're open 24/7 in the native language of a country. Everybody is trying to position themselves as having a better experience. And I think it's an area where this is where I think the marketing teams, especially on the digital side, and sales have to come together to really holistically think about the overall experience a customer will have at every touch with your brand.
Okay, what is the empowered consumer?
The empowered consumer is all of us. I think that as buyers in our personal life, we behave a certain way. We look online for things we want to buy. We ask our friends about what they think. We may go do showrooming and look at a physical store at something we want to buy. Then we might come home and we shop. And that behavior we have in our empowered consumer life is starting to transition and translate itself from B2C over to B2B. And when you think about that behavior in B2B, what's different for us is the fact that we aren't used to consumers/customers having this much power during the selling journey. They're much more informed. They're much further down that buying process before they ever reach out. So I think the empowered consumer is all of us that now transfer those kinds of buying experiences and buying triggers and things that we value in our personal life, transitioning over to what we do in our professional life when we're consuming from a B2B perspective.
So, how should technology vendors sell in this age of the empowered consumer?
Well, Gartner, we started talking about, and I really introduced this a few months back, in talking about the fact that we believe that the sales force of the future is going to be a customer-driven sales organization. And what we mean by that is we let the customer begin their journey the way they want to buy, number one. Number two, we receive them in the means or the channel in which they want to engage. So is it online? Is it face-to-face? Is it an inside salesperson? Is it chat? Is it video? What is it in the way they want to engage? And we really uncovered 4 unique scenarios or segmentation, if you will, around how these buyers come to you. The first one is they say, I know what I want, I'm ready to buy. And that's kind of obvious. Salespeople, get out of the way. The second one is, I'm ready to buy, but I want to shop. And while I may be familiar with your brand, I may be an existing customer. In the first scenario, the risk was fairly low. You knew that they were going to buy. In the second one, the risk gets a little higher because they're going to shop for you on price, service, features, and consumption models. Those are the 4 things they start to look for. And they may be pricing and shopping you just to get a better price from you. They may be now looking at a different brand, or you don't have the new consumption model, or looking at the customer service. They haven't had a good customer service experience, so they're looking to transfer what they have now to a new provider. The third one is, I know I have a problem, but I don't know how to solve it. That's very different than the first 2. And so thinking about how are you actually going to engage the customer when they know they have a problem, but they don't know how to solve it, is not something you can do in a low touch model, which those other 2 may be easier to do in a digital low touch model. The fourth one is, I'm a customer who doesn't know I have a problem, and so I'm not looking to solve it. And that's a very different proposition from a salesperson's perspective. Longer sales cycle, higher risk, they may never buy. It might be a nice to have, not a need to have. And so we tried to define it in 4 easy categories to really help sales leaders and marketing leaders understand that regardless of the persona, the market, the segment, the industry, the kind of technology, the complexity, the average selling price, et cetera, tried to get to the commonality across all of those different metrics and land on something that is actually digestible for a sales leader with all this rapid change that's happening. So I think that once you know that you have a more empowered buyer, and experience is important in making brand decisions, you got to land on something that you can action. And I think those 4 have really resonated in the market today.
Okay, Tiffani Bova, you are on a roll. We are doing a lightning edition with Tiffani. Fast questions and fast answers. Is there an optimal sales process?
Is there an optimal sales process? Well, if that were the case, everyone would be hitting their numbers quarter after quarter, year after year. So I would say, unfortunately, no, but there is an optimal sales process for your particular company. And so finding that is what's important. Is it you're going to do it by market segment, by vertical, by industry, by geo? You're going to look at the buyer journey and what they're actually accomplishing before they ever reach out to you. But I think that there is a more effective way to sell. You just have to uncover what it is for your product or service and brand and company. And then you also have to be much more optimized around the kind of buyer you're trying to attract, the kind of customer, et cetera. So I don't think there's one answer. I think there is an answer for each individual company.
Great. What is the seller's dilemma?
So the seller's dilemma, I started talking about that a couple years ago, and you know, the innovator's dilemma has obviously, and the innovator solution has tremendous cachet in the market. So I said, you know what? I said, once again, technology for technology's sake is interesting, but if you can't sell it, it kind of doesn't matter. And so I wanted to say the seller's dilemma, similar to the innovator's dilemma, is while you are getting disrupted in one particular category of product you're selling today as a sales rep, how do you prepare your sales force for the next product that's coming out at the same time that you have to keep hitting your numbers? And so changing tires on a car going around a track 60 miles an hour is the greatest way to describe a seller's dilemma. Hitting quarterly numbers, maintaining growth, and keeping the lights on while at the same time you're doing big transformation, re-segmenting your customer base, getting new skills into the sales force, et cetera. And doing those two things simultaneously for a quota-bearing sales leader is super difficult, because they'll always default back to, what is it that I have to do this quarter to hit my numbers? And they will leave to the wayside quarter after quarter, month after month, week after week, day after day, the work they need to do for the future.
We hear about innovation as some sort of, quite frankly, often a jargon-filled, vague aspiration. But in this case, does innovation increase sales?
So innovation, I think, gives you, well, it depends on how you define innovation, right? There's some innovation that is slight feature enhancements that call themselves innovative changes in a product portfolio. And then you have others that are really highly innovative. And I think if you've got just feature enhancement, feature improvement, let's put that to the side and not count that as innovation at this moment. But when you're really talking about true innovation in the business, the challenge there is, for a sales leader, as well as for marketing, quite frankly, is I cannot look at that new innovative product or service we're taking to market with the same lens and the same metrics and the same sales go-to-market methods and models that we've always used. You really have to be willing to look at it with a fresh eye. If you're going to launch something that's truly innovative, don't just repurpose what has always worked and expect it to continue to work. You really need to say, is this a moment in time where we can try to innovate on the way we position our brand, the way we market and message to our customers, the way we upsell and cross-sell to existing customers, the way we organize and sell and reward and incent our sales force. I think if you're truly innovating at the product level, you have to truly think about innovating across the remainder of your organization. If you just do it in isolation, it may in fact fall flat. The customer may never understand it's truly innovative. And that would be a shame on all accounts, especially from a product perspective.
What is the optimal relationship between sales, product development, and marketing?
So, this is sort of that age-old question, how can sales and marketing get closer? And I think outside of tech, you see a lot more synergy between the chief marketing officer and the chief revenue or chief sales officer. It may even be that they have a similar reporting relationship. One may report to the other. They may be peers. They may be on the same team, et cetera. And inside tech, that isn't really the case. Inside tech, marketing is really working hard to transition themselves to being much more valuable beyond delivering leads, quote unquote, right? It's about delivering quality leads and being better on segmentation and smarter with the customer journey. And where I think it falls apart and where I think there's a lot of room for improvement is the handoff between marketing and sales and the handoff between sales and marketing. That intersection point now can be improved with technology and the usage of technology and data. But the trick there is you have to use the data and you have to use the tools. And then you have to be willing to trust what the data tells you. So I think the problem has always been that sales felt marketing wasn't giving them what they needed, and marketing felt sales wasn't following through on what they were doing. And so the biggest thing for me is trusting the process and making sure that that handoff is seamless and valuable on both sides.
Yesterday, I spoke with Larry Augustine, who is the CEO of Sugar CRM. And one of the things that we discussed is the difference between customer engagement and CRM. And so I want to ask you that question. What is the difference between customer engagement and CRM?
Well, I think customer engagement, customer experience, like I said, is absolutely the new competitive differentiator. It's really the new battleground for businesses. I think CRM is one of those tools that can enable both sales and marketing to be smarter about the engagement with their customers, making sure that you're capturing, if you will, the digital breadcrumbs that happen along the way of the journey that the buyer is on, taking that information and being smarter about how you sell, being smarter about the information you put in the hands of a sales rep before they step in front of a customer. And so I think that the tool set itself, CRM and others, are highly critical to making the customer experience more impactful. right? The whole goal is to have brand advocates. One of my friends always says, it isn't about attaining customers and attracting customers. It's about getting advocates. It's about getting people to love their experience with your product, service, and your brand. And I think if the tools can give that information to be smarter at the moment of truth when a sales rep is in front of the customer, I think it's fantastic. I'd say this, I'd say CRM and PRM, so the partner relationship management side of it and the customer relationship side of it are critical. But if your sales reps aren't using it and it isn't populated with relevant information about the buyer before the sales rep ever picks up the phone, then having CRM for the sake of saying you have it and checking off the box doesn't do anybody any good.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about customer engagement. And so what are the components of a successful customer engagement strategy?
That the customer's happy. I'd say ultimately, right, that you want them, number one, to buy something from you. Number two, you want them to tell people that they really enjoy working with your brand and your product or service helps them be successful in their business. That they're willing to then stay with you from a loyalty perspective, and the lifetime value of them is very high. So I think ultimately, right, it's a win-win. If the customer gets what they need in order to using your technology, your service, your product in order to extend their capabilities with their customers, because I think technology providers forget sometimes that it's our job as tech providers to make sure that our customers are successful with their customers. And so the advocacy, the enablement, the great customer experience, et cetera, has to work itself all the way down to your customer's customer. Because if that isn't working and they're using your products and services and their customers aren't happy, then in the end, everybody loses. So I think that success, the metric of success is a combination of customer satisfaction, lifetime value metrics, your revenue and growth numbers, and really your ability to just continue to add value to your customers' businesses.
This is fantastic. We are learning a whole lot from Tiffani Bova of Gartner. Social media. What is the role of social media in customer engagement?
Oh, this is a good one. So one of my colleagues, Hank Barnes, who you've also done a lightning round with, he does something fantastic called Friday Fails, and it's hashtag Friday Fails for any of you who want to follow it. He does it on LinkedIn, and it's a great mentoring moment. What we do is between the two of us, we capture our worst social selling experience through the week. As I'm sure you can imagine, I get approached a lot in social selling, whether it be a cold email or a tweet or something on LinkedIn. And if I have time, sometimes I will reply back to those emails and say, before you try and sell me to help me with my sales strategy, you may want to actually look that I'm probably not the right person to solicit helping me with my sales strategy, right? Which means you didn't spend 15 seconds on my LinkedIn profile, or you didn't do any, searches on me at all. Once again, going back to, you don't know your customer. And so that failure is really starting to show itself that if you are lazy offline as a sales rep, you cannot be lazy online, because now you have the ability to reach so many more people so much quicker with such greater scale, that now what happens is I've had a bad social selling experience with a particular brand. And let's hypothetically say I was looking for something. Would I go back to that brand and say, you know what, I'm looking for this kind of service? Oh, I remember this guy reached out to me on LinkedIn and he wasn't very familiar with me versus he was. If he took the time to do that, what ends up happening is I might file that and say, hey, if I'm ever looking for a company like that, or someone asks me for a reference, I might be able to forward this company over to them. And there's a big difference between the Friday Fails and one that has taken the time. So I'd say social selling is another tool in the bag of a sales rep to be used appropriately at the right time with the right set of content that you're going to be delivering. But just sort of mass emailing to a list that puts my first name in a canned email. I mean, really, with the amount of data going back to CRM that we all now have about customers, that's really just shameful. To me, it's just laziness on the part of the sales rep.
So let's take a step up and talk about these relationships. How can sales how can sellers create great, durable relationships with prospects and customers?
So I'd say this. I'd say the only thing a sales rep has the ability to control, and I put unfortunately in brackets, is their behavior in front of a customer. The only thing they can control is how they act, how they engage with, how knowledgeable they are about the customer at that moment of truth when they're sitting in front of them. Everything else above them, what their comp plan is, what their territory is, what their geo is, what products they sell, who they report to, all of those things are out of their control. That last mile is the only thing they can control, which is the way they behave. And so as a sales rep, when I was a quota carrying rep, I became a student of my profession. I said, you know what, if I'm going to sell into this vertical, I started selling into the legal industry. I had been a paralegal on my summers in college, so I understood the vernacular, and I read law technology product news, and I kept up on what was happening on law firms, and I became a student of that vertical so that I could intelligently talk about it. But more importantly, I at least understood what they were asking me. I remember the first time I was sitting across from a CFO, and he said, well, my whip is, and in my head, I thought, what is whip? I did not know WIP stood for work in progress 20 years ago. And so I made a note to myself, and you just have to keep honing in your skills. So the only thing, like I said, you can control is your own behavior, which means if you become a student of the vertical industry, technology, read about what's happening in the market you're paying attention to, keep your top 5 customers on your alerts so that you know what's happening in their business. I say that is something that you have to take ownership of as a sales rep, is that you have to sell smarter, and it starts with you.
What should vendors know about the unique requirements of mobile salespeople?
So I think mobile is another usage of social. I think it's another tool. The availability of information and quoting in real time in front of a customer is really fantastic. I mean, talk about having to not drive back to the office and sit down with someone and come up with pricing. And you could, in some cases in real time, give them information. You can find out enormous amounts of information about a customer when you're sitting in front of them. So I think the mobile seller, while still an expensive cost of sales, because face-to-face is still always going to be one of the most expensive, is it has to be used appropriately. Maybe it's a demo. Maybe it is showing them a presentation on the fly. Maybe it's showing them video instead of just PowerPoint. You can get really creative with the kinds of ways in which you use the mobile device during the selling process. And it also gives you great opportunity to be light on your feet in front of the customer and change up what you thought you may have wanted to do when you walked in the door. So once again, I think tools are effective when used appropriately, and that the sales rep is smart about when and how they use them, checking it off a tick box for the linear process of selling, because that's what your CRM system tells you need to do next, leaves out the most critical part of the equation, which is the customer. Let them take you on the journey, guide them where you need to, don't let them make the wrong decision. This isn't all about, it's about the customer and they're always right. It's about the customer, and you have to help them make the right decisions. And I think mobile and the tools around mobile are really critical to doing that, especially in the face-to-face selling.
And finally, how can enterprise buyers be good customers? And what's the value to a buyer of being a good customer?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're working on some research right now on this topic that I think as a buyer, for any buyers that are listening to this, I think it's only fair that if you're going to spend time with a sales rep, that you actually are in a position to make the purchase. And you're very clear with that seller about where you are in that journey. If you haven't gained internal approval, tell them that. If you've gained internal approval, but there's some hesitation, tell them what the hesitations are. I think all of us are strapped on time, and I think that sales reps may misinterpret some signs from buyers that we're moving the deal forward, when in reality that isn't what's happening behind the scenes. So I think, if a buyer can just be upfront with the seller and say, hey, listen, this is where we are, and the seller can make the decision either way, whether he or she wants to continue spending time there or not. But at the end of the day, I think that if the buyer is internally more in tune with that process they have to go through in order to gain approval for that acquisition or that purchase, it's better in the end, because if you've just spun the sales rep on a lot of cycles and it ends up in a no buy, in that particular deal, listen, that's just part of being in sales. You have to just sort of, dust yourself off and move on. But it doesn't mean that later down the line, the buyer won't end up buying. But I think to be a good buyer, it is understand what your internal process would be, really communicate that with the sales rep early in the process, because then we can set the proper expectations between the two in that selling and buying exchange.
Wow, Tiffani, you have just gone through a lot of questions.
Yeah, in 30 minutes. In prep, he says, you only have a minute per answer, and it's a firestorm, and get ready. I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
Hey, I wasn't joking, right?
No, it was great. It was great.
Well, you're
thank
fantastic.
God for media training.
Well, you are unflappable.
On the subject of sales, hopefully.
Well, yeah, I think so. So, so the bottom line. So, just share with us, as a kind of summary, what's the bottom line for vendors who want to sell more? So, just sum it all up for us.
Be smarter sellers. We are much smarter than we think we are. We know what's happening in a lot of situations with the customer. And so I'd say just sell smarter. And the way to sell smarter is to get more engaged with marketing, use more tools, whether it's mobile or CRM or social selling, do your homework on your own, and don't just take what's given to you if you know from like those social selling Friday fails. Like, don't send out an email that's not personalized just because you have to check off a box and send 50. So, I think in our gut, we all know what's going to resonate with customers. And so I think it's just doing what's right at that moment of truth and selling smarter.
Fantastic. Well, this closes out our lightning round edition of CXOTalk. It's episode number 125 with Tiffani Bova from Gartner. Tiffani, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me back again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Michael.
Well,
and I missed Vala. So tell Vala that he missed everything I said about marketing.
I know, Vala, wherever you are, I hope you're having a good time.
That's right.
And on Friday, we are going to be joined by Sri Srinivasan, who is the Chief Digital Officer for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So that's Friday. And please sign up for the mailing list, and we'll see everybody soon. And Tiffani, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Bye, everybody. Thank you.